The name is Justin, the year 2022, and the camera we're talking about today is actually the one that we're recording on right now, the Olympus EM-1 Mark II. And I just want to talk a little bit about this camera now, being over 5 years old in a slew of many other incredible cameras. This one still stands out to me as my favorite camera that I have ever used, which is saying a lot because I've used a good chunk from early Nikons. Panasonic G7 is kind of what we built this channel on. Then we went over to Sony A6500, and then we had the EOS R from Canon, which was a fantastic camera, and have had the privilege of using other, Sony A7 IVs and Canon M50s and SL2s, like just a lot of the most popular cameras on YouTube, GH5s, GH4s, the big names. But yet this camera, even today, this many years later, I still love it for a lot of good reasons. And if you've been following this channel for a while, you maybe would have seen a little bit of drama of I bought this camera, was in love with it, and then had some issues where my mic jack was noisy and I couldn't quite get that figured out, and then I couldn't get the HDMI out to work properly to connect to other devices so I can use monitors and can use it for streaming. And then Olympus came out with some software, and anyway, I thought I was going to sell it, replace it with a Sony ZV-100, that's what they're called, I think. And I was so close to selling it. It had appraised. I could just say yes to an email. And in the end, I kept it. And it's the camera that I've been using for the past couple years to make less videos than I did before. The last couple of years have been a little bit weird. We haven't left the house as much, not as many adventures, vlogging, all that kind of stuff. But I've been making a lot of videos, mostly talking about PlayStations and video game monitors and video game accessories and stuff just that I've been doing over the last couple of years. And this camera has been the one that's been sitting exactly where it is, looking fantastic and delivering on just everything that I've really asked it to do in this situation, minus a couple of flaws that seem to be a little more unique to my unit, which you can get a bad unit and camera, but I've been able to work around and still makes it fantastic. So I want to talk about this mostly for people who are maybe searching on YouTube. You landed here because you're maybe looking at a used one of these and you're thinking, is this a good value in 2022? Should I still buy this camera? What's the story of it? Is it any good? Yes, it is a very good camera. And let's talk a little bit about why. And before we even talk about the camera, I think the greatest thing about both Olympus and Panasonic is that the lenses are interchangeable between the two, and you get so many cool, unique lens options with Panasonic and Olympus that you just don't find on other platforms because this camera has a micro four thirds sensor. I'm recording right now on a first gen. This lens is probably getting close to 10 years old. I'm going to say Panasonic, not an Olympus, a Panasonic 12 to 35 millimeter f2.8. It is an incredible versatile lens. It's like a 24 to 70 on a full frame camera, and it works perfectly on this camera. Autofocus, fantastic. And I've been able to use a ton of Panasonic and Olympus lenses over the years, and especially the pro level ones. They're sharp. The autofocus is great on them. Because Panasonic was primarily video first and Olympus followed suit with their micro four thirds lenses, they're quiet. They when you're zooming in and out, they're not noisy. Like, everything about them looks and works fantastic. And the fun part about cameras are lenses. And the lenses on this system get me so excited today and also for the future, because OM Digital Solutions, who now runs Olympus, they're committed to continuing on with this. And there are some super cool lenses. Like, I'm really into golf. I haven't really kicked up the golf content too much other than on my Instagram. If you want to find it, it's Justin Does Golf. I'm not getting serious into camera stuff yet, but I watch a ton of golf content. And if I was going to start my golf channel tomorrow, which is always a temptation to me, I would buy the Olympus 12 to 100 millimeter f4 lens. This is a fairly compact lens that is going to work incredible with the image stabilization in this body, that is going to give you a 24 millimeter to 200 millimeter f4 range while still being compact. That is just not a lens you can get on other platforms. A constant aperture, meaning f4 through the whole range, from like 24 to 200 millimeters, so it's not going dark when you're zooming in or having to adjust. And you can go wide from like vlogging on the course to zooming in 1,000,000 miles to be able to zoom in on a green, not 1,000,000 miles, but pretty good zoom to actually see the shot on the other end. Like, what a cool lens. And there's so many other ones out there. The 12 to 60 millimeter f2.8, the older value Panasonic ones like this, the 12 to 35 millimeter f2.8, like just so many cool prime lenses and ultra wides and just countless cool lenses that are around now and in many times discounted because some people have moved away from this platform, which is a shame. Let's talk about the camera itself. This is why I love using this camera. First of all, the thing that everybody wants to talk about sometimes, color science. Color science is effectively how it reproduces skin tones and colors. I mean, we know what color science is. Olympus, for me, has my favorite color science. Now, Canons, I love the way they looked in the EOS R. You could color grade it in lots of like super cool special ways. But something that I've valued lately is not having to spend so much time editing videos. Now, if you're like a full pro, you aspire to have a red, and you love color grading and just getting everything perfect, there may be some other options for you. At my job, my day job, I have a Sony a7 III. I struggle with the colors on that. Panasonic had great colors. I always felt like pretty easy to work with. Canon, good colors. What I love about this Olympus is right now, this video has no color editing done to it whatsoever, no adjustments. It's simply on Portrait 5, and I haven't adjusted contrast, saturation, sharp, nothing. This is just a straight profile out of the camera, and I think it looks really, really good. You could probably be a little bit more creative with it. Sometimes I'll maybe add a little bit more contrast or tint the shadows or do something, but just straight out of the camera, this camera looks awesome on just the regular settings. But you're also gonna get log on this camera, OMD EM-1 Mark II. You get logs. So if you wanna get a little bit more serious about coloring, holding on to some of the extra highlights, shadows, you've got log in this camera. Technically speaking, this camera does 4K, 30 frames per second. You've got like higher bit rates where you can do like cinema. There's like a cinema mode, which is like really high bit rate. This is just the regular 4K 30. It's about 100 megabits per second. A fantastic looking picture. You've got 60 frames per second. Unfortunately, you don't get 120 frames per second. You can get an EM-5 Mark III if you want that, or you can get an EM-1 Mark III if you want 120 frames per second. I think 120 frames per second is still cool. It's not as popular as it used to be. Peter McKinnon blew it up, and then everybody followed suit, and it's maybe not used as much. But if you want super slow-mo, maybe not this camera, 60 frames per second, you can still slow down. But every mode on this camera looks really, really good. So I love that. It has got in-body image stabilization. It's got a floating sensor, essentially, that means that whatever lens you're going to put on it, you're going to get stabilization. And this is really, really cool because a lot of the prime lenses, both Panasonic and Olympus make, don't have stabilization in them. So you're able to use the in-body image stabilization, and then with compatible lenses, you can use both the image stabilization in the lens and the in-body image stabilization and just get super smooth, silky footage. But the big reason, and it's funny, when you see right now, as I'm recording this video, I think NAB is going on right now. It's a big broadcasting show that's happening down in Vegas, and they're talking about camera technology. I think I went probably 5 years ago to it, and I remember talking with the Panasonic rep there. It was in the heyday of, I think, the GH5, and going, can you please just give us a camera with great autofocus? And the disgust in his face as I was saying this of going, what do you need good autofocus for? Kind of, or that it would compromise quality or all these things, which now you can see like Sony's blown that myth out of the water, Canon, everybody else has incredible cameras with incredible autofocus. But I loved my Panasonic G7. I loved my Panasonic G85. I loved the Panasonic GH5. But the autofocus was a killer for me because even for videos like this, What I love about the Olympus is it has both contrast and phase autofocus working together to mean that I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that I am always in focus. And if you're a creator or anybody who's making videos where you're the subject or other people are just the subjects and you just don't want to have to worry about things accidentally being out of focus, which I still see regularly from creators who are using GH5s or other cameras that don't have good autofocus, it's just super frustrating. And it's one more thing that you have to worry about. And this camera, the autofocus on it is just, it's perfect. It's just incredible. It's smooth, it tracks. It's just always got it nailed down. And I love having a camera that I can trust for autofocus. Plus, this is a professional grade camera with proper weather sealing. So you put a weather sealed lens on it. You can take it out in the rain and the muck for golf. Perfect. I don't know why this suddenly turned a golf video, but maybe I'll do a best camera for golf. It's this one, YouTube algorithm. Hear me say it. I don't know what it is, but it's a fantastic one for that. And this one has a lot of other features. One of the things I love is there's a switch you can flick on the back. And your two dials go from being aperture and shutter speed to now being ISO. And for me, I do white balance on it, but you can change it all sorts of things. And having that kind of flexibility and functionality with all the custom buttons and other things can make it just really handy if you're running, gunning, and want to be able to change things quickly without digging into menus. But overall, the OMD EM-1 Mark II is just, it's a complete package of a camera. Great autofocus, great color science, great looking video codecs, fantastic lenses to pick from, a swivel out flippy screen that you can see yourself on, which now thankfully most cameras are going to. A couple of years ago, that was a huge frustration. You've got incredible in-body image stabilization. You've got the weather sealing. You've got all the dials. You've just got a little bit that everybody did certain things better, you would say. Like Canon, people maybe love the color science. They didn't really do in-body image stabilization. Their ISO low light performance was not very good. This one is pretty dang good, especially for a micro four thirds smaller sensor. I'll take it over a Canon M50 any day, that's for sure. Reasonably good low light performance. Sony had, their autofocus was generally pretty good. Their in-body image stabilization, okay, but I mean, they had the 4K early on. They had the super slow motion. They were slow on the swivel screens, which was always a killer for me. You had Panasonic, great color science, terrible autofocus. Like all these other camera manufacturers doing certain things really well. It boggles my mind that nobody got into Olympus who said, hey, we'll just do everything reasonably well. Good low light performance, especially on the newer ones, 120 frames per second, it's higher frame rates. We'll do great in-body image stabilization. Let's do great autofocus. I mentioned color science. Let's give you a flippy screen. Let's give you mic input. Let's give you weather sealing. Let's give you lots of functionality, customizability, control lately, and we'll give you the webcam software on your computer so you can just use it as a webcam. All of those things make it just a really, really cool camera. So if you're out watching this in 2022 and you have the chance to buy one, you're going, what is this camera? Is it good? Is it going to work well? It's a fantastic choice. If you can, check it out though. Because this was the big reason that pushed me to want to sell mine was I got a bad mic input jack. So the mic input on mine is noisy. So when you record on it, you just get this little underlying hiss that drives me crazy. If I was having music in my videos, you probably wouldn't hear it. Lately, I've just been doing simple YouTube uncut videos like this, or just a tiny little bit of B-roll. And that hiss drove me crazy. So in videos like here, there's a mic up here with a little recorder. So I just have to record my audio externally. So if I was vlogging or in the field, that wouldn't really work because you're not going to do a separate audio recorder. So check it out if you can and just make sure that that's not an issue. Or if you're buying it from a camera store or somewhere like that, just check it for warranty. The majority of people that I talk to that have had this camera, that hasn't been an issue. My good buddy Dave Mays, he had an EM-1 Mark II for a number of years. His was fine. And this can happen with cameras. I just got unlucky, and I'm trying to remember, I think I bought mine off eBay, so there's just not really any recourse. Took me a little bit to figure it out. That was the one issue. And then the second issue, which now has mostly been resolved, was my HDMI output just couldn't connect anything. Like I would try and connect it to a monitor and I would just get like weird errors, like it wasn't working. And it was a mixture, I think, of cable. And then when I updated the firmware, even though it wasn't one of the things listed in the firmware, Now, the only thing I got to watch is if I connect it to like a 1080p capture card, my camera's got to be in 1080p. It won't like downsample in the HDMI out because it's putting out a really nice full quality signal. If you do have a nice recorder to connect it to, it's going to be really nice. And but if I'm hooking up to a monitor now, I can actually see what's going on in the monitor. So if I'm setting up shots like this, and that didn't work for me before, and I was stuck on a Mac, and there was no firmware update supported on the Mac, and so I couldn't even update the firmware, other than maybe I could have found somebody's computer. Anyway, I got a PC, and I was able to update it, and that took care of a good chunk of, well, at least my HDMI issues. So my minor issues have mostly been resolved, other than my audio, I think, is still hissy, although this is the first real recording I've done since the firmware update. I tested all the HDMI stuff. I didn't test the audio. Maybe that's been resolved. Probably not, though. But I still just love the camera, mostly for the simplicity of when you record a video on it, the video looks good, the colors are good, the autofocus is fantastic. If you're moving around, the in-body image stabilization is good. The flippy screen, for me, just coming from a vlogging background, so helpful. It's got the mic input jack. It's got all the professional dials, wheels, settings, and it's weather sealed. I think that's it, plus so many cool lenses. So overall, in 2022, I think that makes it a really, really compelling package. Anyway, it's where I'm at on YouTube. You can complain about not having B-roll and I just talk the whole time. You can go look at a number of any of the last like 10, 15 videos. Those were all shot just on this camera. It's mostly in the studio. You know, I've had it out a few times. Looks fantastic, but when you get to know cameras, you just know when you got a good one. And this is a good one, other than the hissy noise jack. But if you don't have that issue, buy this camera. You're going to have a ton of fun with it. Put a cool lens on it. And there's really nothing you can't create with this camera. I'm Justin. Still 2022, even after, I don't know how long I talked for. A while. But guys, appreciate you. Thanks for following along on this channel. And yeah, that's it for now. Any comments, drop them in the comments below. There we go. Long one take. I'm going to turn this off now.